works all the time.
No, I'm stuck here.
I'm just here.
That's actually amazing.
That's it. I'm just here with my baby maker mug.
Oh, here comes Bob.
We are live now. Perfect. Bob's just in time.
Just in time, Bob.
Okay, this is the 4th episode of Real Talk.
But you really need to learn to keep track and learn to.
I'm terrible at keeping track of things. But anywho, this is the 4th episode of Real Talk. Today we are going to talk about the paranormal on the stage. All kinds of fun stuff involved with that. And yeah, we're going to introduce ourselves first. Some of you know who some of us are, and some of you don't know who any of us are. So it's kind of nice to introduce. Well, I'll go first, I guess, since I'm talking. My name is Austin. I'm the artistic director here at the Pharmacy Theater. Why am I qualified to talk about this? That's a great question. I finished writing a play right now titled Untitled Paranormal Play. And in the course of that writing, I took a long class on parapsychology and hypnosis and all those fun things. And at the end of that class, I was surprised to learn that I am now a registered parapsychologist with the Complementary Medical Association. So that's a lot of words for I know how to make the brain say things. Is what that means. But that is me, and that's why I'm here. So who wants to go next out of these 3 lovely people?
Okay. I'm Jessie.
Hi, Jessie.
I guess if I wanted to tell you what qualifies me to talk about the occult, for lack of a better term, is so I'm Native American. I am Lenapean, and I'm actually a registered Mentwalk. So what that means is I come from a family of spirit talkers. It's essentially the next step up from being a medicine person. I am trained in herbalism, just like my grandmother, but I am also trained in spirit talking, so using animals and omens, for another lack of a better term, to understand what your ancestors were trying to tell you, or divination, some almost ways trying to predict what's about to happen, especially when it comes to things nature-wise that are supposed to happen. There's a lot of that. But then on the skeptic side, I also have a master's degree in neuroscience. So I have all the science knowledge. I know why none of it should work. But I'm also one of those people who have seen and understood things that can't be explained. So you can only believe so much. And I'm an animist pagan. I practice my ancestral religion, which is a lot of witchcraft and divination. And I also dabble in a little bit of European things, oracle cards. I'm very into and interested in divination in general, especially speaking to past spirits. That's kind of my real interest points.
Before anyone goes next, I just want everyone in the universe to know that whenever I task Josh with finding someone interesting, he always finds the most interesting person for the topic. Not even like, I've been searching for like 4 months to find someone else to speak on this.
At the end of the day, bro.
I told Josh, and Josh was like, yeah, I'll find someone. And then
I'm the people whisperer.
Boom. Anywho, Josh, you go next.
I'll go last. Sarah, go.
Yeah. Oh, okay. My name is Sarah. I am the resident dramaturge for the Pharmacy Theater. Though I don't have nearly as many qualifications to talk about this as Jessie seems to have. I did do the research for Austin's play, so I did spend a couple of days kind of looking into ley lines and looking into paranormal things. And the closest that I have ever come to dabbling in anything is I have Shakespeare-themed tarot cards, and Austin gave me a Ouija board. That's
I
about
remember the
it.
Ouija board.
Oh,
Yeah.
be careful with those. I know a weird amount about Ouija boards.
That's terrifying. You know, my 12-year-old would enjoy
That's terrifying.
discussing Ouija boards. They are like all over it. They're like, can I have it? And I'm like, no, because you pull it out of my attic and who knows what you're going to do with it.
I used to make my own. Like, I used to design them and make my own.
I definitely remember doing that in middle school when like pretending to like be a witch was like a really cool thing, and like everyone watched The Craft, and I was like, yeah, we're gonna take, yeah, it was like the cool thing. It was the hip thing. So like me and my best friend were like, let's make a Ouija board out of a cardboard box and do it on our like the driveway or something. And it was probably a terrible idea. I don't know what we accomplished, but we did it. So
And it's also important to note that Sarah does pretty much all our research for the pharmacy plays. And it's always a privilege because she does do a lot of dramaturgical depth, and kind of just adding why you're here is because, like you said, you just did paranormal dramaturgical research.
She did leave out the fact that I made her research all of Hans Holzer's cases so that I could pull out like the America's First Ghost Hunter. Like I can pull out, like,
he sends me a text and he's like, hey, can you do me a favor? And I'm like, what do you need? He's like, I need you to look up the top 5 Hans Holzer cases. And I was like, oh, okay. So I did all of that. And then he was like, I have something else. And then he like sends me the park name. And I was like, the fuck? Like, you want me to research a park? And then I looked into it and I went, oh, no, okay, no, this makes sense. All right, cool, great, awesome.
None of my text messages make sense to Sarah, and I feel bad about that.
He just sends me random like things, and it's always, can you do me a favor? And I'm like, what do you need me to research this time? Because I know you're working on something. I'm waiting for the next Anne Boleyn question to pop up.
No, I still have that stack of research from last time.
Okay, you still have that? Yeah.
Okay, Josh, who are you?
That's gonna be a good. Okay, so who am I? I'm Joshua. I'm the analytical director for the theater, but I'm also a complicated person. I should always lead with that. I should, some people say polymath, other people say I'm a complicated basket case. So I generally I went to school for essentially phenomenology, the psychology branch of philosophy. And within that, we study things like consciousness, perception, alternate states of those things on a scientific level. So it's not all subjective. You have to balance against the objective. As we have a neuroscientist with us today, we'll be able to, hopefully that's our card to say we bounced it against the wall of objective. But I also have some personal experiences that may or may not come out. I'm pursuing in the future, at least in the application stage, for PhD in cognitive science. So animal, human, and machine learning and thinking. But I also have, like Austin, done a number of. I've read a number of books, and I've also taken a number of courses in parapsychology and abnormal things, but it's funny because I also align with Jesse on a small wave, because I do through initiation and other experiences in my life, I do almost identify with the idea of medicine man or tooth spirit. I also enjoy reading tarot in the past as a linguist and semiotician. So I know that my introductions are always the same. It's always, hey, this guy has done 20 things, and let's see what he's going to say about it.
Professional basket case.
Glad to have everybody here. Let's get it rocking.
Okay, so now that you know who we are, today we are going to talk about paranormal things, kind of what are they about, and how to properly portray them on the stage. And just to start it out, I just want to talk real quick about already paranormal things that you see on the stage, like the ghost in A Christmas Carol, like those kind of things, like the PG version,
The campy.
the kid friendly versions of paranormal things you see on the stage. So yeah, do you guys have any examples other than the ghosts in A Christmas Carol?
You have the witches in like Macbeth.
Yeah. Sarah said Shakespeare. I know Shakespeare.
Duh, Austin.
Yeah, you have the witches in
No,
Macbeth for sure.
Yeah. You have. This isn't quite close, but I'm reading Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, and you have like the ghost of Cedric Diggory is on stage a couple of times, and some ghosts of other like new students from within this book that are on stage, and they're kind of the stage directions are kind of weird for those.
Yeah.
They're just told to like walk on stage and kind of stare, and I'm like, that's weird.
Did they film that version? That edition?
I don't think they've filmed it. I do know that it's been on the stage a couple of times, but I don't think it's actually been on film yet.
Okay, but it's been on stage. So I'd be curious how they pulled that off with tech.
Well,
yeah,
let's go. It's on Broadway when they reopen.
It is
Part 1 and Part 2.
Yeah, because Drina's girlfriend went to see it when it first came out, and they were like, "Oh yeah, it's great," and I was like, "Okay, but like, were you creeped out by the people just standing there?" Because like it also pulls in the ghosts of everyone that died in the Battle of Hogwarts, and they all just kind of like stand there and stare at you, and I'm like, creepy.
That's the perfect stage.
Well, it makes you wonder. I mean, that's a scary, but I also often think of less, and I know we're specifically the stage, but just in general for screen, I was a fan of Casper before I realized the realities of things. It was a fun animated, not literally, but animated in that it was sort of less scary in the traditional or in the real way that some of these things are, and it was more about like the emotions of his life and such.
I love Casper. Oh,
and still, it's a depiction of a ghost.
Yeah, and they did have an animated series for Casper,
right?
And then also have like I remember watching the Scooby-Doo movie. I can't remember like which one specifically. They all deal with spooky things, but the one where Shaggy is going to like his like grandfather Beauregard's mansion or whatever, and it's haunted, and they have all of these. They've got animated ghosts, and they've also got the scary guy. Like the villain, but like the ghosts then they're almost like the Three Stooges in that they're silly, they're goofy, they're they're breaking things, they're trying to help, but they end up messing things up even further, like that whole kind of thing, which is easy to do with animation. But I wonder if you could do something like that on a stage as well.
Yeah. What Jesse said earlier with Shakespeare is a lot of Shakespeare plays have ghosts and witches or themes that can be pulled in. Like you might see like someone seeing the future or someone predicting the future. So I know that Sarah is our resident Shakespeare expert, but yeah, like Shakespeare is definitely a good example. But like before this, I did research about like how many like scary horror paranormal plays are there in the world that get regularly produced, and there's like 13.
Funny number.
Yeah, right. And like the biggest one is The Exorcist has a stage adaptation. Like,
so if you want to talk about like more horror themed, you have Repo the Genetic Opera, which was originally a stage play, and that deals with, and then the sequel to that, which is The Devil's Carnival, also has a lot of future telling. If you want to go really classic and you want to go into future telling, the entire show of Pippin is pretty much just the devil telling this future and trying to convince him to kill himself.
Yeah.
I may not have mentioned it, but I weirdly also have a theater background.
See, Jesse It's just the perfect person. Why are we here? They can just talk about it the whole time.
But then if you also want to talk about maybe not necessarily like a Broadway stage, but the stages that you see in theme parks where you have live action people also working with different technology, you get a lot of Pepper's ghost effects. A lot of the Universal shows, like at Universal in Orlando, are live performers interacting with these Pepper's ghost effects to give, especially for like their haunted, I can't think of what it's called, but their haunted season. They have a lot of those effects on stage because those are all live performers in those houses.
Scary. Oh, and that's another thing. Like, it's not quite the stage, but like haunted houses and like anything like that. Like, I know I am a scaredy cat. I don't do haunted houses. So I don't know, but I've heard stories like those same kind of effects, where if you're going through a haunted house and you have the different things, not just the actors that are in the haunted house, but whatever technology they're doing around it or with it.
The space itself holds its own energy too.
Yeah, we're getting there, Josh.
Okay.
That's part 3. We're getting there.
Man, because then I got excited.
So part 1 is definitely what we just talked about, which is things that we've seen, and
they're all goofy. They're campy. Can you think of any that truly, really? I mean, you can be fair as much as you want in theater, but sometimes they just don't meet the mark, and you don't feel. For those of us who have maybe gone through something, whatever that something is, when you see something similar depicted on stage, you might not be impressed. It seems that way.
With my experiences with watching those things on stage, or like at haunted houses, or those variety shows at theme parks, it's not so much like the weird, creepy, like scared feeling. It's a lot more of a jump scare, like a suspense that's building up, and then boom, like the clown pops out. Like, you know the clown's gonna pop out, but the clown popping out scares you anyway because of the suspense building up to that moment.
Well, and when you're walking through a haunted house, you don't necessarily have the time to gain the depth of information you need to actually get a scare from the surroundings or from the storyline. Like, the jump scare is all they have sometimes because they have to get you in and out so quick.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the jump scare definitely works. I think the jump scare is also very prominent in like horror movies today. Like, anyway, like
pretty much.
And the music sets you up.
Yeah, the music sets you up for it.
The music is always, yeah.
Like, I'm not gonna lie, like my grandparents were big horror buffs, so they watched scary movies all the time. So I'm pretty sensitized to that now. But
on a farm in the middle of nowhere, that's scary.
Yeah, in the middle of nowhere. But like the horror movie that gets like shitted on the most for no reason is 13 Ghosts. Like, if you haven't watched that movie, go ahead and watch it. Like, it is fantastic. It's
Who's the lead?
What?
Who's the lead?
I forget. It's the guy who plays Monk, isn't it?
Is it Adrian?
Whatever his name, he plays the dad, I think.
This is bad because I know this actor.
My brain's not working today. But
he's also in Bands Visit.
He used to play Shaggy.
Tony Shalhoub.
Yeah, he's in it too. Like, they're both in it.
Well, no, Tony Shalhoub was Monk.
And then the guy who used to play Shaggy is in it too. But it's basically about this guy who's trying to become immortal. So he sets up in a prophecy these 13 ghosts that are needed to like power the machine in the house. And they're all following an ancient prophecy. And he sets up the deaths to capture the ghosts to power the house. And it walks you through that and it's like fantastically shot. The ghosts are portrayed scary, but not like jump scary. Like, they're just freaky to begin with. But like, that production and that show is fantastic.
Did you watch the 2001 remake or the 1980 original?
2001 remake. That one is on I think that one's on Netflix. The 2001 remake's on Netflix. Or Hulu, one of the two. It's streaming.
It's somewhere.
Interesting. But we could probably go to part 2 at the end. So, because we're talking about energy now. So that's very important. And Josh is very excited about that.
Energy.
So if you've watched any ghost hunting show on TV, any of them, you hear them talk about energies at some point, or like how, or my favorite is whenever the mediums talk about psychic imprints of like events on land, on a house,
sedimentation,
like changing of the energy or whatever. So how can you bring those kind of things into like what are your opinions on energy in the paranormal? And Sarah, you can talk about this one because you learned about ley lines.
Yeah, I did. I'm so excited. Okay. Well, I think, and you and I actually talked about this when we were talking when you first came up with the idea for this paranormal play, and for some of the other theater projects that we wanted to do once we're allowed to, be in contact with human beings again, is to do a show at a creepy old cemetery. I feel like that's one way to bring that kind of energy to a show is to do it somewhere that is already synonymous with creepy spiritual things. So to do it at
the death energy already sedimented.
Yeah, exactly. So to do it at a in a cemetery, to do it at a place that like has a history of being haunted or something. Like when we were talking about the haunted houses, I automatically thought of the Eastern State Penitentiary, which is considered to be haunted, and so now they have the big walk through and you do a haunted tour of the penitentiary. So like that kind of idea. Like Austin said, I did research for ley lines when he first started doing this project, and you can find there are a whole lot of historical places around the world, like Stonehenge that are considered to be that have ley lines crossing, that have this specific kind of energy. So if you're trying to do something occult related, for lack of better terms, these are the types of places that you want to try to go to because they have a lot of this energy built up, and it's going to be where you're able to make some of the strongest connections. And you can find maps on Google of just a ridiculous amount of ley lines, and it'll tell you like this is good for doing this kind of thing, and this is good if you're trying to do this kind of spiritual connection. And it's absolutely insane. And I didn't know how to read it, but it was interesting to look at.
A lot of things in this on this topic. There's a lot of great things, but I didn't know how to read it.
Yeah, a lot of great things. Didn't know how to read it, didn't understand it, but it was really interesting to look at. And of course, also have the scientific side. It's like, this is impossible to be a thing because these are all man-made structures, and no one would have actually known that this particular place has the ability to be something useful, and then people who believe in ley lines say, well, maybe they were drawn to this place to build this for this reason.
So something that's always been really interesting to me about things like ley lines is you almost have to sit down and wonder who assigned them a paranormal association, because most of them do have an actual scientific relevance, whether it's like a plate touching or an actual electromagnetic field that is located there. That's where the lines came from. But then somebody walked in and was like, I bet you there's ghosts here too. And so you kind of have to sit down and be like, well, who assigned those? What did they believe in when they assigned them? Because one singular group of people didn't assign all the ley lines. So then you also have different cultures who are associating the same concept with the same spaces, for lack of a better term. And so that's a really interesting thing to look at, because with me personally, knowing like indigenous tradition, the big thing is don't screw around with our grave sites. That's where all our magic is.
I was hoping you would address this.
It's all located where the dead bodies are. It's the only place you can find it. And we don't like nobody has ever been like, oh, don't right there. That's a line that you can't cross, or that's a line where you can do X, Y, or Z. Because all of those things only exist in our cemeteries. Like for our culture personally.
Yeah.
So then you're now crossing into lines of whose magic are you playing with?
Yeah. And going back to like Native American cemeteries, I'm just gonna go back into if you've ever watched any ghost hunting show, and they're like, this is built on a Native American like gravesite, and like that's when they blame. I don't know if I want to say that's what they blame, but they blame the uptick in paranormal activity on the angry Native American spirits for disrupting the gravesite.
Yeah. And I have a lot of feelings about that. First off, I have a lot of feelings about ghost hunter shows in general. My hobby in October is sitting down with a cup of cider and ripping them to shreds.
Oh, good! I have a partner for that season now.
That's all I do in October. I'm like, nope, I'm watching Ghost Hunters for 12 hours and telling you why they're wrong. But
I did not say anything about Ghost Hunters. That show's sketchy.
Any paranormal researching show like that, they're all really sketchy. But
now we can have a lecture on why TV is sketchy. Cable.
But the immediate like big pop culture thing I think about when you talk about, indigenous gravesites is Pet Cemetery. That's the big pop culture one for me. They didn't listen to Herman Munster.
Edward Furlong.
Dead not to do it. They did it anyway. But I don't think that necessarily indigenous people have we have a paranormal association with those spaces, but that association is never angry. We don't associate the death of these people, which in most cases came naturally for indigenous gravesites, with anger that they're being disrupted. I understand the anger of living indigenous people when their ancestral spaces are being disrupted, but I don't feel like there's a specific increase in paranormal activity for the disruption of these spaces that we as a people associate with. That seems like a very colonizer concept to me.
Yes.
Josh just let out the biggest sigh I've ever heard.
That is so funny that you put it that way, because they do the same thing with Egyptian grave sites. Not saying now, the subjective side of me does warrant to say that sometimes these things do come from a disturbance in the force. But I would argue, just like Ghost Hunter shows, every time that someone wants to stake a claim on any sort of paranormal or occult activity, you have to investigate it, which is kind of what you say you have to investigate these things, because you might find out that it was just some guy that maybe the guy who paid for that construction site decided that they were going to run a story about how they disturbed the cemetery, and it's just a publicity stunt at the end of the day.
Yeah. While I was writing the play that I was working on, I watched a lot of ghost hunter shows to kind of figure out what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. Wow, that's really dumb. Why would anyone think that type thing? And I watched one where they went in to investigate because they were like, when we go into this part of the building, we feel really uncomfortable, like something's watching us. And they did a bunch of tests with electricians and things, and they found out that there was a wire making a sound at a high decibel that was causing an irritation that would mimic feeling that uncomfortableness, because you can't hear it as a human, but it's causing irritation, and it kind of mimics that paranormal feeling. And they came out and like, oh, your place isn't haunted, dude. You just got some faulty wiring you might want to look at. So like those kind of things were important whenever I was writing this play because like is he seeing ghosts or is he just like or is there something weird going on in the environment mimicking that situation? And
So you had to figure out how to map the algorithm to prove to the reader and or the reader's mind that these are not, physics anomalies. These are mystical, metaphysical things occurring. Not so. If you as the writer think in the mindset of the investigator, then when you go to write, the things that you're putting out will have those little algorithmic entrails so that the reader can go, well, it's not that because of this. Well, it's not this because of that. Oh, they checked that. It's not that, or whatever.
And that's why I made the main characters' two best friends investigators. So that I could put in that research that I got of like, oh, like this electrical thing is causing this. Like
the dialogue.
Like they can say that in the dialogue so that like
and having two creates a dialectic so that you can present multiple perspectives.
Yeah, I mean, once you read it, you'll realize that it makes sense.
I'm excited.
But
I know what
happens. Oh yeah, Sarah read it. Sarah thinks it makes sense.
Sarah thinks it makes sense. Sarah really enjoys it.
But I guess I don't even know what to say next. We talked about that. I think it's important to, while Jesse's here, and Jesse's really smart, because they said neuroscience, which is very smart stuff. Can you talk real quick about, I want to say, not the scientific view of the paranormal, but, yeah, let's just go with that. Like a scientific viewing of the paranormal occult world as the objective side, so then we can go into the next segment and work.
Oh yeah. So one of the easiest things for me to associate with is, I live pretty close to Gettysburg, and another October hobby of mine is following around the ghost tours and making noises. Because paranormal existence depends at least, I am not the person to say it doesn't exist, because obviously from my credentials, I very much do believe in a lot of paranormal things. However, at least 75% of paranormal existence today depends on the gullibility of who you're talking to. The amazing, like, you can convince gullible people that anything is happening if you use the right words or if you try hard enough. And another good example I have is I work a lot with crystal healing and crystal magic. It's amazing how many people you can just, I can just hand you this crystal and say, wait until you feel the vibrations on this. And all of a sudden this rock vibrates for them. And there's no reason for it. It's just because they want it to in their head. Like they're just convincing themselves that this rock will vibrate and that will somehow heal them. And that's how ghost hunter TV shows work in general.
Placebo.
They spend all that time convincing you. The funniest thing to me with things like that is, you get these white noise readings. The minute that they put words on the screen to tell you what that white noise says, you can hear it. No matter who you are, no matter how much you don't believe in it, you still hear it every single time, because as soon as your brain reads it, you associate it auditory, and that's
I want to interrupt you real quick because I don't know if any of you listening or any of you on here have TikTok. TikTok does the same thing. They're like, listen to this song and I bet you I can change the way you hear it. And they put the words on the screen and then your brain starts to hear those words. So it's definitely the same thing. Because like I watch those and I'm like, it did not say that. Like I don't hear anything. And then it's like, hello. I'm like, oh yeah, now I can hear hello. Because my brain's like, that word says hello, so that noise has to say hello. And yeah.
You know, Nancy was just saying about watching the show. Like, that's what I was thinking about, Austin, when you were talking about how you watched it. Like, I remember watching, my mom used to watch the Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventures and all that shit, like, when I was growing up. And I remember sitting there, and as I got, like, when I was younger, I was like, oh, yeah, like, this is scary. Like, oh, my God, ghosts. And then as I got older, I was like, wait, how much of this is just that medium is there saying, oh, this is what's happening, this is what's happening, this is what I'm seeing. And they're like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And like, I remember my grandmother used to watch like the the mediums, like, that would come on like the Maury show, like Sylvia Brown.
Little Sylvia Brown.
And like, oh God, I loved her so much. And then there was that guy that I can't remember his name, but like, they would, you know, talk with these people in the audience, and they'd be like, oh, you had a male die in your family recently, and then they're like, oh yeah, like my dad died 2 years ago. Like, they say the most vague things to get you to then be like, oh yeah, you're right, you understand, like, you're talking to them.
I'm going to interrupt you right now, and I'm happy that you transitioned us to mediums, because it's not all about ghosts. Jesse, I'm sure you're going to have something too, but I'm going to go first. Mediums in general are the idea of the medium. I have a big problem, and always have, with people taking money for that. When you make it a business, and I see it all the time, you go to these holistic expos and there's a guy there who's like 50 and he's selling sessions where he'll get, and it's like, to some of us that take this seriously, I could never, ever, ever in my life take money for we'll just call it counseling something. I don't understand why they do that. So first you have to look at the fact that people are making a business out of something spiritual. And then you look at the fact that 75 is a good number for most things paranormal. 75% of the time, these are people that are, whether they have the skills or not, they are abusing the customer by either flourishing or using actual linguistic, because there are actual linguists. I know, as a semiotician and a linguist, there are skills you can use to do this to people, you know, and there are actual scientific skills to protending and retending, you know, events in life, past or future. But when these people, a lot of times, people call themselves a medium and charge you money and use those skills for bad. And therefore, that ends up discrediting all of us when you do that.
Yeah, because then you get, you know, there's an astrology reading, like business here, or on the way, like I pass it when I'm going to Giant in Camp Hill, and like you automatically then associate mediums and that kind of thing with, oh, you're just the hokey person. Your horoscope, the hokey person with a crystal ball at the carnival tent, like that kind of thing, and you're like, well, that's just capitalism at its finest.
Well, not only that, but then you can open up the whole other can of worms of cultural appropriation and paranormal activity, because all of that astrology stuff and like the Madam, I wear a turban on my head and read your fortune, and there's coin, you know, those are all things that are not, like, I can promise you that in the state of Pennsylvania, you're not going to find me an astrology reader that comes from, you know, a cultural heritage of actual astrology readers. Like, that's, and I agree completely with Josh. I mean, you know, the basic principle of spirituality in indigenous culture is that, you know, those things come free to you. You seek them out, and like, the payment, for lack of a better term, is knowing that you may be dealing with something that you don't actually want to deal with at the end. Like, you know, the universe will charge you for that. That's not my job. Like, you might not want to know the information that you're seeking out, and once you find it out, you know, that's all on you. I don't have to, that's not my problem anymore. But
well, maybe a little more responsibility than that, but the idea that the reward is free. Like, I said it was no skin off my back to speak to you, and you can walk away with something else, you know, another thought.
And I mean, when you look into things like that. Also, in general, and again, I can only speak from an indigenous perspective when it comes to things like that. But they're not things that you can like walk in one day and be like, "Hey, how's my dead dad?" Like that's not how it actually works.
Right.
It's a lot of dream walking and meditation and searching for all of these universal clues that are being presented.
There's pressure on that practitioner too.
Yeah,
it's not easy. It's not a willy-nilly, oh, let's have a beer and I'll reveal the future to you. Like, it's not like that at all. If anything, to get answers like that practitioner is going to be like fasting for a week and they're gonna probably do some drugs. Like the list. The point is
drugs.
It's not the point. We'll get into that too. That there's with and without. You can achieve these things with and without. But the point being is that that person's going through a lot. It's not just a matter of flipping a burger. They have to put their body through things in order for their mind to unlock something for you.
And there's also, like, while I agree that it's not something that should be charged, and most people who are claiming to be mediums or whatever are like top-notch scam artists, you also have to recognize that there are the small individual cases where these people were going through psychotic episodes, and then even hearing these false narratives has calmed them.
Right.
You have to look at parts of it as an actual, therapy. For people who absolutely can't get over, the losses or whatever. There are those few people who, all they need is one of those, Sherlock Holmes narrative individuals to guess that their relative died and be like, oh, they're okay. And that's it. And then all of a sudden they're fine.
Right.
So I guess there's a real fine line there, real fine over hurting and helping, but it does exist, and you have to recognize that it does exist.
Yeah. I think that the important thing to talk about now is something Jesse said earlier with whose magic are you dealing with? When we were talking about ley lines and things like that, like, whose magic are you dealing with? Because yeah, like,
I love that line. It's so funny because it refers to both situations where you could either be an unexperienced practitioner that you can summon things. I'd love to talk all day. That is specifically something that happened to me. I had an experience where I summoned something that I shouldn't have and had about the worst week of my life. But it was an experience nonetheless. You can also have the idea of whose magic is it if you are in one of these psychotic states or if you've done too much drug. These things can put you into alternate states of consciousness, and therefore it's not always what the shaman is achieving. It's sometimes you can, in neuroscience, you can get into your own fold because that's the way consciousness works. It folds over, and back on itself. So you do that,
so
you can also get.
Let's put it in a real world perspective real quick. Okay.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
So I wouldn't say about 3 months ago, I called Josh over to my house because I got this eerie feeling about the mojo was just off. And I was like, this is creepy. I need a second opinion. So I called Josh over. And Josh is like, yeah, this definitely feels a little creepy. And then I found out that the creepy neighbor girl, because I live in a duplex, was using a Ouija board in her basement. And I was like, I'm not fucking with this.
The basement of your house is the worst. Like the base level of your house, not bad. But in the basement, and it's funny because it didn't feel like it was in your basement. It felt like it was oozing over the crack from the other person.
But like my basement has a creepy door that is deadbolted and chained shut. Like, it's like an extra room that's deadbolted and chained shut, which is creepy to begin with.
That's the room I was attracted
to begin with.
Sure.
But it's also nice to know that there's a church right next door that was here since 1782. So there's probably a cemetery somewhere around here too. Just letting you know. I don't know where because the maps don't show one. but I find it hard to believe that a church from the 1700s don't have a cemetery close by. But that's
That's actually really interesting. I'm sorry. My computer's on a little bit of a lag, so I don't mean to talk over anyone.
Perfectly fine.
But that's an interesting point that you make when talking about whose magic are you working with. Is so people, for whatever reason, because it's the main culture and main religion, literally think that Christianity and Catholicism is the cure for any occult phenomenon. Like, as if, well, I've got a cross for that. So
Right, and that's a bigger problem with culture that big Christian. Okay, we apply the prefix "big" to all the things that we criticize. So there's big Christianity that definitely seems to absorb and fold itself onto almost everything, and so people end up thinking that that's their ideal of religion, is that the Abrahamic religions are all there are.
Well, but then you end up with somebody going to an individual to get some kind of magic performed, and usually if they're going to regret it enough to go to the church afterwards, it's magic that they shouldn't have been playing with in the first place. They've never been religious, but all of a sudden they end up with some kind of results, and they're like, well, better become a Christian.
And then from the experience that I was talking about, Josh is like, just sage your house. And then I was like, well, I'm not really religious. And he was like, well, sing a song that means something to you. Just like do something that's meaningful to like whatever.
As a phenomenologist, I try to translate spirituality across religion. So if you don't have a religion, we have to identify what you value.
Exactly. And after, like, listen, I smudged the hell.
You could sing any song. It didn't have to be a song about
God. That wasn't
God.
a song about God. God, no. I was singing a One Direction song. That's different.
It could have been all the single ladies. All the single ladies.
I was singing What Makes You Beautiful.
As long as your energy was right.
Because I know every word to that song.
Now I just have the mental image of you just walking around your house belting One Direction.
With
like
with
this
a
is
white sage stick. Yes, that was me. But now
this is something I need.
Now the house feels normal, like on the part of the basement and up the 3 floors. Except that one room that's dead bolted off. Still creepy as fuck. Still don't go near it unless I have to.
Well,
and you've never been inside. That's the part that keeps me alive.
That's it.
I can't. If I have something like that in my dwelling, I have to be able to go in it, absorb it, love it. If I can't get inside,
do you want to come over?
No, thank you.
For you.
Well, we'll have to take a look.
I ain't going in, but you can definitely go in.
We gotta write a new paranormal play about this fucking room in your basement.
It's really weird because
I thought this is our story of our life, where Ashton and I are bickering back and forth, and Sarah goes, "Oh, this is fucking," like.
It's also really weird because it's always wet.
Like weird.
Why?
It's 110 degrees outside. Why is it wet?
Why is it wet? Someone's just peeing in there. It's fine.
It's locked. Who peed in a locked room?
The ghosts. Duh.
So we talked about mediums. What else can we talk about in the paranormal?
I think that in the last 10 minutes we have here, I want to talk about theatrical advancements that can portray these things more realistically.
Tech.
We have projections. Jesse had talked about smoke and lights can portray things. How can we make these things look believable on the stage? Because
I'm gonna say the first thing you want to do is work with your act. If it involves a live actor, so tech aside, this is still tech and dramaturgy. What you want to do if it's the case of a live actor is, I think it would be great for the director or somebody to provide an experience for them if they've never had any kind of experiences. But that's if you're dealing with a live actor. When it comes to tech, I feel like it hasn't been done yet. The phrase, it hasn't been done yet. In other words, I don't think because they do it all the time with the screen, but on stage, I'm still waiting for a tech director to come forward and do something exceptional.
Let me tell you something, Josh. In the play I wrote, there are two big paranormal scenes.
Okay, experiences.
And the one is Oscar sees, she's a shadow figure, for lack of a better term. He sees a person in an aisle of the grocery store on the video camera, like security camera. He goes to that aisle. So this is where projections come into play, because you're to project the security camera footage. And he goes into that aisle, and there's no one there. So you see him there. But then, like, things start falling off of the shelves around him. Like, projections are key, because for the audience to be able to see that, it has to be projected. Pre-recorded ahead of time, obviously, but projected. Makes sense. The second,
somebody with a green glove comes by and pushes off the things, or they rig it,
like fishing line, like across your frame and you pull
rigged.
it off. And then the second one is when they're actually ghost hunting in the park. Oscar's very skeptical about it. He jokes about it a lot. Like, he's like,
that's the dialect.
Y'all are dumb. Like, this is stupid. Why are we doing this? And we go there, and Oscar hears the harmonica of the boy who dies on the railroad tracks. That's why I made Sarah research it, because I was like, there's some sketchy stuff going on.
Music is the best. Hearing music.
Yeah, so he hears the harmonica playing, and then he, like, sees a blue mist.
Blue is a good color.
Listen, I've done my research, Josh.
I know, yeah.
AKA Sarah has done my research.
Right, Sarah does your research, and I just kind of review it.
And then, so the blue mist is like, and then, like, all that fun stuff. But those two things are, like, subtle things that can be done today with tech that is available today in the theater world. But, like, everything else, like doors opening by themselves, like, that's a theater thing you can do. If you can make the Titanic sink on the stage, you can make a door open by itself. Like,
you got little temperature variations, subtle things that you wouldn't think about for any other show, that I personally think would be important pieces to the puzzle if you want to really win people over with the experience.
Like sending out a high decibel sound to make them feel uncomfortable in the stage.
Right.
But I feel like it's also kind of, like Josh already said, like, those are the things you kind of expect to happen. So, like, if you've seen a show that has any kind of paranormal elements, whether it's on the screen or on the stage, I feel like the audience is going to start to expect that. Like, oh, I'm at a paranormal show, so I've been to one of these before, I'm going to start to feel X, Y, and Z. But like Josh said, there hasn't been someone who's like, this hasn't been done before, we're going to go above and beyond to, like, really
beyond the program spectacle that we all expect, like Casper.
Exactly. Or like, this show has,
whose idea was it to put a sheet over a kid and say that's a ghost? That's programming.
That specific makeup style, like, on you see that and you go, oh, that's supposed to be,
oh yeah, they're like grayed out.
The witches of.
What are the archetypes we have? Vampire, ghost, Frankenstein monster, all these 50s Halloween costumes,
Yeah. And it kind of goes back to, when we study Shakespeare, like, oh, the guy comes out in the cardinal attire. He's a bad guy. Like, he's that attire. So you have the same thing. If they come out wearing a specific makeup style, or if they're in a specific costume, you're like, oh, that's supposed to be the ghost. Like, that's supposed to be my paranormal thing. And now I'm going to experience a temperature drop, fog, mist, maybe some eerie music, that kind of thing. So I think it would be interesting to be able to find shows and find directors who can kind of push beyond that. I don't know how, but
and I think if you're looking for things like that, one of the things you want to go back to, one of the best places to look is the theme park industry, because they're in competition with each other constantly. Universal competing with Knott's Berry Farm on their haunted attractions is a constant who has better technology, who can make this feel more realistic to me, who's able, but then you're also looking at, I can sink $100,000 into the technology for this one haunted attraction to make mine better than theirs. But I think that it's an unfortunate circumstance. But I think that as far as technology and stage goes, especially right now where everything closed, you're seeing where they're making really big advances because they have to compete with each other. Where not a lot of other people are able to make those advances right now.
Who's commenting
I'm
now?
thinking, Josh. I'm thinking. My brain doesn't work.
I heard something.
My brain don't work fast. It's a weekend. My brain's.
No, I think that it's the problem becomes when you program the spectacle. The problem becomes, is that going to discredit real experiences? Because if you absorb the programmed spectacle for what we're supposed to expect with these things, and then and then in the case of going through it in an actual experience, you might be shocked. You might be like, oh, where's Casp? It's the idea that we create the programmed spectacle can in turn eliminate the public's ability to accept the realistic parts of the paranormal, or a better word than the paranormal world in phenomenology, we say the oniric space, so the invisible part of reality.
Thanks for using the layman term after that.
You're welcome for layman and big word.
I think that what Josh said is very important, because where do you cross the line from real world experience to spectacle? Because a lot of theater productions sometimes rely on a spectacle to bring people in. They rely on some like big light thing or big sound or like massive sets or like intricate sets. Like there's big spectacles on the stage. And if anyone has learned anything from doing a show with me, is less is more.
We do a lot of natural spectacle, and that's what I think Jesse's point was, is that rather than killing your budget or trying to do the biggest fancy thing, people should sit down with their colleague and figure out how to do it naturally.
Yes, you should lure ghosts in. That's the way to do it.
Very much so.
That would be one way to like really get people into it. Be like, I went to this show, and like I'm telling you, it almost felt like they really summoned a bunch of spirits in the theater space. Like
that's what I was suggesting you do for live actors. If you have live actors that need to portray an oniric spatial experience, then maybe give them take them on a vision quest or whatever. But how do you do that for everybody? Because
you know how you do that for everybody, Josh? Exactly.
You don't bring people. You don't bring ghosts to the party. You just don't
Jesse
do that.
said, words are important. Like you can spin a narrative before that in your marketing to kind of put out that precedent that the space we're in is haunted and we're doing this paranormal play.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking when I brought up the Eastern State Penitentiary and like doing a show in the cemetery. The Eastern State Penitentiary website has all about the history of the prison, and it says why, like, since the 1940s they thought it was haunted and like what happened. So going in before they even are a part of this attraction, people are like, oh my god, it's haunted, we're gonna feel something. So if you go out and you say, okay, we're going to be at XY cemetery, this is when the church was built, this is the dates on some of the gravestones, people are going to walk in being like, holy shit, this place has probably got something going on. We're going to feel
like let the history create the spectacle for you.
Exactly. And even if you don't, Oh, go ahead, Josie.
Jesse.
And that's like that's the best product of marketing that you can even possibly bring up. So I actually did makeup at the Eastern State Penitentiary's haunted house when I was in college. And that entire haunted house, none of it touches the inside of the prison. It's not actually inside the prison. It's set designed to look like it, because being inside the prison is too dangerous for people running around like crazy people and they get scared. So that's like the best concept of marketing is, you know, you think you're in that haunted prison, but you're actually not during the entire time.
Oh, see, I didn't know that.
You're not supposed to know that. That's how.
Exactly. Don't tell anyone.
She just ruined it for everybody.
You got programmed, girl.
It's also like, it's like with Josh, like I've been using a lot of like Masonic temples for like plays and things, and like not even like, I'm not saying that Masonics do some creepy shit, but just like the secret society type thing can also draw in another layer of creepiness to like
There are things that Austin has seen without knowing what they are, and we walk in the room, and sometimes I don't even know what we're looking, and so like I have to use what I know to explain to him what he's looking at.
We walked into a room and I was like, "Is this like a demonic sex cult? Like this?"
Yeah, because it was set up for a degree.
Like, what is going on? But like I read about the Oddfellows because I was researching, and like some Oddfellow lodges have like a human skeleton in it to remind the members of their mortality. Like that in itself is creepy.
But the catch is that, now I don't claim to know anything about Oddfellows very much, but my guess is the loophole would be that they're not actual cadaver skeletons. They're probably
classic science skeletons.
Yeah, like if they do that, it could be. But the idea that spectacle is created, you don't have to say anything sometimes. It's created through the person's own psyche. Austin walks into the room and thinks, boom, boom, boom,
demonic
boom, boom,
boom.
boom. But then,
that's the first thing.
But then the SME comes in the room. So this is not just Masonic lodges, this is anything. SME expert walks in the room and then goes, well, actually, what you were experiencing as X is actually Y. And so you come to find out that the things that are so it looks like he describes it as, what's this sex cult thing going on or whatever. But like it's like robes, swords, that kind of stuff, and you know I come in and I'm like, well, actually, this is for this person.
See, it makes sense when he explains it.
Practical.
But it reminds me of the scene from Da Vinci Code when she peers in the window and like the Illuminati sex rituals going on. That's what it reminds me of.
And it makes me think of, again, because I know Austin is writing a play about this, because I did the research for him. When you look at fraternities and sororities, so his play is about hazing, which isn't quite the same thing. But this isn't necessarily, well, I don't know. There could be stage productions of stuff like this, but you have the initiation ceremony that, like in films, is very occult-like. It's very weird and it's very creepy. And I know that there are some films that then take that into a more paranormal aspect, where like they really are in a cult and like they're just putting on the facade of being a sorority. But so that same concept of you don't have to do anything. You could just say, oh, I'm going to, you know, join the Delta sorority or whatever. And because of other people, because of other stories, because of whatever history it has, you automatically have those particular feelings. So you could walk into the fraternity building or the sorority building and see.
And this can be in negative ways too. I talked to Austin extensively about how I don't approve of a lot of my brother's actions, words, deeds, because sometimes brothers join Freemasonry for the wrong reasons, and it becomes a vanity thing, and so on, and because they receive that program spectacle, they will continue to turn that over for all their brothers. Whereas there's a good group of us that are, I don't know where to describe it yet, but we don't act and think that way, and can very much condemn that. But because that group of people, you know, that's our program spectacle, is that we should be against that. Whereas the other group is programmed that is how we should be. So that happens too.
Yeah, I think something like that. That kind of concept ends up falling into.
Now we're in occult fraternities, I guess, from mediums.
I'm going to circle it back to what you and Jesse were talking about earlier. I feel like that falls into like all media, is that you have to be really, really careful of representation. Because like you and Jesse were saying earlier about mediums and about those people, if you're putting a certain stereotype on the stage, that's what the audience is going to walk away thinking. And then they're going to walk into the real world and they're going to see, the astrology reader. They're going to see the hokey tent at the carnival and they're going to say, oh, that's what it is. Whereas you have people like you, like Jesse, that actually are putting your entire body, mind, and soul into this kind of thing. And that's what's getting overlooked because that's not what's being represented on the stage. So I think a big part of not only just like what elements or what like technology can we use, but also making sure that it's authentic, making sure that you have someone like you, like Jesse, like me, like Austin, a dramaturg, someone who can do the research and find the person to talk to and say, okay, what is it like to be this kind of person? What is it like to do this thing? So that then the whole cast, the whole crew understands that it's more than just hokey balls and a woman in a turban hat that says, you're gonna find your love in the near future, like that kind of thing.
You have to like make sure that you, with doing things on stage, you have to know your audience and like know what exactly is going to be considered a cult to them, because things that are scary to one grouping of people aren't scary to, or like my occult experiences aren't necessarily what people would consider scary, the same way. And like I can give you a really great example. So yesterday I left my house and there was a fox dead in my road. And we have a fox on the property that I hate. I hate it with a passion of 1,000 suns because it eats my chickens. But the fox, the fox is my guardian spirit. So I can't do anything about that fox. Like culturally, that fox, I can't trap it. I can't kill it. I spent all day yesterday waiting for something bad to happen because there was a dead fox in front of my house. All day until dinner time, and the fox that actually lives on my property came out, and I realized nothing bad happened because it wasn't my fox that got killed. So that was something that terrified me. It instilled a sense of anxiety and dread in me. But other people would be like, yeah, that's roadkill.
Yeah, a normal person's gonna walk down the road and be like, dead fox, cool.
And when you start talking to like different heritages and different people of color, the idea of European and white horror or occult or paraphenomenon is so different once you get into different heritages and different cultures. Like voodoo seems really scary when you talk to European people about it, but then there's people who actually practice it and they're like, but it's not, it's how you practice.
No different than any other witchcraft, Wicca.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I feel like, and I know if I'm not careful, Josh will go on a tangent with this, but I
actually have a Masonic brother who identifies as voodoo. Just put that out there.
Interesting. I feel like it's one of those things that also the word itself ends up carrying this specific idea. So like the word occult, while it means something originally, by the time it trickles down to our generation going to these shows, the occult is a bunch of people in robes chanting around a human or a goat sacrifice. But like that's not what the word means at its core. That's not what it, do you know what I mean? So like the way that the words and what they mean has just changed so drastically. Like voodoo, that's, like Jesse said, that's terrifying to some people, but to people who actually know the history of voodoo, know what it is, what it's supposed to do, it's not scary. The word pagan, the idea of being a Wiccan, like all of that carries this really heavy negative connotations, but for the people who are a part of it, who practice it, it's not
a program spectacle.
Exactly.
Yes, I don't want to interrupt you, but the one thing that wasn't mentioned the entire time that I think you brought up without mentioning is the thing that can be scary is the intent behind things. Like I could like you can practice voodoo, Wiccan, like be like a pagan, and it's all about the intent behind what you're doing. Like you could like you're practicing magic, but like you're not. There's no harmful intent behind it. Like, and I think that's a lot of what people
So
don't understand when they're going into it.
you can have ethics without morals and dogma.
Yeah.
Josh,
That is the big conundrum for many people. What? Oh, you only have that because of morals and dogma. It's like, no, ethics is a separate thing. I don't have to have deity or dogma.
Mhm.
Yes.
can you explain that in layman terms, real quick?
Morals and dogma or
Just
ethics?
no,
Okay,
actually,
so
can you just the
so
concept of dogma? Can you explain that?
okay, so dogma means I can only be a good person and do good things and be nice to people because there will be some sort of spiritual reward. I'll go to heaven, or God will like it, or the gods will shine down upon me with favor. Uh, to say that to have ethics without uh, ethics is essentially a set of morals you receive without the attachment of deity. Morals is doing good, being a good person because there's a deity that will smite you if you don't.
The like,
At least that's the dogma part of it. Morals is that you have these good ethics from your deity, and dogma is that you do good because the deity will smite you if you don't. And where we have ethics for the rest of us humans, and specifically, atheist, pagan, whatever, whether you even without deity and without the contract with deity, you can be a good person and be good toward other. It's called ethics.
Me. I think in just wrapping everything up, I just have one last thing to say, and it's kind of what the three of you have been saying the whole time. But like, I personally will never write a piece about something that I don't understand. Like, in the paranormal play that I wrote, I chose deliberately not to veer off into any other kind of paranormal occult stuff. Like, I wanted to write about the stuff that the audience would see if they watch the jinky ghost hunting shows, just so that it's a common language between me and the audience. Like everyone,
I'm so proud
everyone
of
has
you.
watched a ghost hunting show
You're
at least
basically
once, so they kind of have that understanding of what I'm writing in the play. But like, if I wanted to add voodoo elements into a play, I'm not gonna do that. Sarah's not gonna research that. I'm gonna find a voodoo practitioner to talk with and be like, so I want this to happen. What is the appropriate way to do this without summoning something that I don't want because I don't know what I'm doing? Like I can
yeah.
research voodoo until the end of time, but like I won't
until you have an upper level voodoo priest tell you that you're an initiate, you don't have any sort of
yeah.
respectable
And just like
authority.
what Jesse said, like I'm not gonna put like such and such is so and so's spirit animal and like go along with that in a story because I don't understand that, and it's not my place to tell that story. And you see that a lot now, where people are wrote plays and now they're apologizing because they're like we didn't portray this accurately because we read one book and now we thought we were experts, so we wrote this musical or we wrote this play, and they're not bringing people to the table to talk about it. Like any representation is important, and whenever, like, I wouldn't use stage in a play unless I consulted someone who uses stage regularly to know what's going to happen if I do it, or like what's the appropriate way to do this because I don't want to be disrespectful in any way. And because like Jesse said, you have to know your audience. Like I don't know who's going to be in the audience, but if I'm trying to portray a Native American staging and I do it wrong, I'm going to offend that one person who might be in the audience, and I don't want to do that because theater is supposed to be a safe collective space. everyone should go.
The big one, if you're talking about specifically indigenous people, is they do it a lot with how they portray singing and dancing. And as an experienced singer and dancer of that genre, I had the privilege once to help choreograph for a show, a musical called Annie Get Your Gun. There's a little segment where they needed to have some sort of respectable choreography, and my big deal was I was going to make sure it didn't look goofy, it didn't look campy, and I think that's the big thing. Whether you're thinking in a dramaturgical lens or a phenomenal lens, you want to find the person who is either experienced or is an expert in that subject.
In layman terms, don't write about shit you don't know about.
And not only that, but you're always going to have people who disagree with you, even so. Like that's something I see in the indigenous activism community regularly. Is there are some things that people are okay with, and then there are some things that people are not okay with, and we're not all going to agree on what's okay and what's not okay. But the best bet is to find actors who can portray that culture appropriately. And then also doing as much research and getting actual words of information from those people, and even more, permission sometimes from those people to actually portray those things to a larger audience, because there are some things that might be out there in the mainstream, but that doesn't necessarily mean that culture wants them to be in the, like dream catchers are a great example. The OB/GYN, they don't want people using dream catchers, but they're out there everywhere. But it's something like if you were to approach someone and be like, hey, could I use this, they'd be like, no.
And it is at that point, like, even if there are people who disagree with you, at least you can't say that you didn't try.
Exactly, yeah.
You're not going to be able to please everyone, but you can try to appease as many people that may be in the audience as possible. And at least you can say, well, I did my research, I read up, I talked to people, I out, like, at least you made an effort. So that one person or that group of people that doesn't agree with you, it just becomes a point where you have to agree to disagree, and where you just have to understand that there's going to be that kind of tension there. But
Submissive attitude can go a long way too.
Yeah.
Very good. You guys are also impressive. When people can talk.
Is there any other topics in the paranormal?
Really.
I mean, we do the occult and fraternities. We did mediums. We did ghosts and spirits. We did some indigenous culture topics like spirit animal, and we talked about program spectacle.
Said it's time to go.
Trying to think.
That's what that was.
The only other thing I would have brought up is we could have been more specific with other things like magic and whatnot, because I know that's huge with pop culture, but I think we did a good job.
That's all. We just make another real talk episode for magic.
There will be more real talks, I'm sure.
So, thank you all for coming and enjoying the day with me in my red sweatpants. I think we had a great conversation, and what's next? Next weekend, next Sunday, I think, we're going to talk about cultural representation on the stage. Following Sunday is the workshop of Untitled Paranormal Play, so that's the next 2 weeks of events. And as always, if anyone in the universe has any crazy theatrical idea that no one else wants to work with, shoot me a message. That seems to be the genre of choice in my life, is plays that no one else wants to deal with, because that is what we do. So thank you guys all for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Is it Sunday? I don't even know what day it is, but